Welcome back to The Outright Effect, a podcast in which unique perspectives challenge us to be better versions of ourselves. We're two ambitious women who talk about how we like to stretch our creativity and work on self-growth to become better people. I'm Shelley.
And I'm Tempsy. And today we have another special guest. Today we have Jason Elleman. Welcome, Jason.
Hello.
Hi, we're so happy to have you. And we are bringing on Jason to talk a little bit about his entrepreneurial journey. After living frugally and saving money by working in the Vegas nightlife industry, Jason started investing in real estate. So after many years, he was actually able to turn a small real estate portfolio into hundreds of rental units that he now owns and manages. So we were excited to have him on.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I'm happy to share my story and hope that it motivates people and gets them out of maybe their regular 9-to-5 jobs and into owning their own business.
Cool.
And that's exactly what we're here for. So glad that you see the vision. I actually met Jason a long time ago. I won't expose our age or anything, but in our high school days, I met him through my brother. And then when I moved to Vegas, I was kind of in a transition period and needed, a room to rent. And in his first property, I believe it was your first property that you owned, I ended up renting a room from Jason. So we lived together for several years and we've kind of stayed in touch since. And he actually helped us get into the new home that we're in now in Las Vegas. Does that sound about right, Jason?
That sounds right. Yeah, that was my first house. I bought it, I think for my 22nd birthday. And then, yeah, we've been in touch for quite a while.
So glad to have you in my close network of friends. It's been really nice.
Likewise.
Well, tell us a little bit about your business. What's the name of your business and what's it all about?
So I have several different LLCs, but they all basically do the same thing. And my main business is LMNOP Properties, kind of like the alphabet. And for that to make sense, you'd have to know my last name sounds like Elleman. That's how you pronounce it. So in high school, people would call me LMNOP. And when I went to create my first business, I thought, LMNOP Properties, let's do that.
Definitely rolled off the tongue.
So basically what we do is, and it kind of started, I guess, originally more with doing residential flips. And, just fixing places up, put them on the market, making a little profit and getting out. I really never wanted to get into doing rentals just because you hear of all those terrible stories of people trashing the place and not paying their rent, so on and so forth. But some of the places didn't quite sell right away. And I thought, well, I need to start making some money. So then I kind of started them as rentals and just kind of went like that for a little while. And now we're to the point where we have hundreds of units. We've gotten into multifamily, which I think is an amazing place for people to invest in. I've learned a ton over the years, and basically we buy low-income apartment buildings and rehab them, get out all the non-paying people or people with low rents, bring people in for probably about 25-30% rental increases, and it's basically the business plan.
Cool. So I think, something that you mentioned that I just wanted to touch on was, to me, it sounded like, in just those few things that you mentioned, it sounds like, as you're kind of moving along, you identify different things that you might want to tweak based on like maybe your needs or what was going on with going from, just flipping properties and then moving into rentals because you recognize that there was maybe like some space, some time in between where you're like, something needs to be going on here. There's, not as much as like activity as maybe you had wanted to see. So I think that's really good to, stay on top of things and like making sure that you're constantly thinking about, what's going on and evaluating your situation. So I think that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I always kind of use the analogy of a quarterback that comes up to the line of scrimmage and, calls an audible and changes the play based off of what the defense is doing. And I think in business, that's kind of something that you always have to do is the market changes. So you have to change your business strategy, or maybe you try something and it doesn't quite work as well as you thought. And so you really just kind of constantly evolving and adapting. And I think that's the reason businesses will succeed or fail over a time period is being able to adapt to changes.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you get into real estate? I know, Tempsy mentioned in your intro that you were working in the nightlife industry and, coming out of that, I mean, I'm sure you could have picked a variety of different things. So what drew you to picking real estate?
So I first bought my first house that I lived in 2007. So that was kind of right near the peak of the market. And at the time I got it for it appraised for $50,000 over my purchase price. And I thought, oh my goodness, I just made $50,000 by signing on this line. That's more than I made, well more than I made a whole year prior to that, living in California and working. And I just kind of was just living in the house, doing life as normal, working in the nightclub industry. And then obviously the real estate market crashed hard, especially in Vegas. And in 2010, I was seeing properties in my neighborhood that were selling for a fraction of what I paid. I saw stuff going for like $40,000, $50,000, and I had paid $170,000. And in my head, I thought, you can't even build a house for $50,000 just in material. You can't even buy land generally for $50,000. Right now, you can buy a house that's already built and the land for $50,000. That's incredible. I don't see how you could ever lose. And so that's where basically I started. I started going to the real estate auction and buying townhouses, condos, small houses for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, maybe spend $10,000 to fix them up, and then I'd resell them and make maybe $10,000 or $15,000. So it was kind of a 20 or so % return on investment over the course of 3 or 4 months. And I thought, hey, this is fantastic. But since the real estate market was so bad still, I mean, a lot of people didn't want to buy houses because they thought the world was about to end. And, why would you commit yourself to a financial commitment of that nature? So that's where I kind of ran into the problem of a few of them did not sell. And that's when I kind of changed the business strategy, and I rented out one place. And after a year, I saw the rental income that I received in a year essentially was how much I would have made if I flipped the property. And property values had gone up, and I still own the property. So I kind of saw I made like double or triple what I expected by doing no more work besides just collecting rent from somebody. And that's kind of when it kind of light bulb went off my head and said, well, maybe you're not doing this right. And that's when I kind of changed the business strategy. One of many changes, but that was an important, pivot.
So how do you get introduced to like real estate auctions? Like, do you have a network of people that you just heard about it, or you just figured it out?
I mean, nowadays online, you can kind of figure anything out. I was just kind of researching, and it just so happened that I have a stepbrother that grew up in Las Vegas, and I knew that he had a friend that was a real estate agent. So I contacted him and said, hey, I want to go to the auction. This is what I'm looking to do. And so we did it. And I mean, everything's learning. You're just constantly learning. I remember the first time I went to the auction and the first property I bid on, I was so nervous. I was shaking. And as I was putting the bids out there, everyone's turning around, looking at me like, who's this new guy? And I don't know what I'm doing. And these guys have like, so first off, this auction in Las Vegas takes place literally in a parking lot outside. But these people have like tables set up and laptops, and they literally will have like somebody come and deliver them a sandwich and some files. And here I am, like, early 20s, no idea what I'm doing. So I was very intimidated to say the least, but obviously it's worked out well. And I think that you have to know, whenever you start out in anything, you're going to be intimidated. You don't have the experience everybody else does. You're going to feel foolish, but you're going to learn, and you're going to learn from mistakes often. But you have to expect that. Expect to make mistakes. Expect to feel that you have no idea what you're doing, and it will work out in the end as long as you put a lot of effort into it.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I agree. So something that you mentioned that I just kind of want to go back on really quick, because I would say that, the geographic location of our listeners are like spread out, right? So I think you had mentioned that some of the properties that you're working on were like $40,000 or $50,000, like for the unit, maybe in an apartment or whatever you were buying. And so the only thing you can buy for Hawaii for that price is a car.
Well,
like there's no way you could live somewhere for that much.
Sure. And I mean, you have to understand this was at the very bottom of the real estate market. Now those places that I was getting for $40,000 or $50,000 are probably worth $200,000 or so thousand dollars. So appreciation has happened. And Vegas is a very cheap real estate market in comparison to places like Los Angeles, New York, Hawaii, most large cities. But it's actually, there's a lot of other, in the Midwest, there's a lot of markets that are a lot less expensive than Vegas as well. So you just kind of got to get to know your area. And that's one thing too, if you want to invest in real estate, and obviously people are creating businesses, it doesn't have to be real estate, but any business, maybe the market that you live in isn't the best place. It's not suitable for the type of business you want to create. And sometimes now, you can work remotely. Maybe you can run a business that operates in another state or online. You just kind of got to look at different markets and realize that you're not confined to specifically where you live to start a business.
Oh yeah, I think actually someone I went to school with is doing something like that. Like I mean, I know he lives here, but I think he does business in other states. So I think that's a good point to make that, it's 2021 now, and we can really do whatever we want, kind of. I mean, to some degree, right? There's a lot more flexibility nowadays than before. I know that you had mentioned, maybe some barriers that you experienced being new to your business and, having to learn from the bottom up, which, I think what you were mentioning to us, your experience there is really helpful and good for a lot of people to hear, because I think that, anytime anyone's starting something new, there is a lot of learning to be had. But would you say that there are any other barriers that might have held you back in the beginning aside from learning?
Well, I think with any business, of course, money, it takes money to make money, as they say. And depending what business you start, you may need a little or a lot. And I was definitely limited with the funds I had. I could only buy a house at a time or something like that, whereas someone who maybe had hundreds of thousands of dollars, could have bought a lot more, made a lot more money. So I think that's it. But with the learning aspect, I read a quote the other day, and it said, what did it say? It said something like 20 minutes of doing something is a lot more beneficial than 20 hours of researching something. And I think that's very important, because I see so many people get stuck on I don't know enough. I need to keep learning. I'm not ready. And, people say in 6 months or a year or 2 years, then I'm going to start. And I think that people just need to start, because even if you fail, because let's say if I start today and I fail in 6 months, I wasted 6 months of my life pursuing this business. If I spend 6 months, a year researching it, and then fail 6 months later, now I've wasted a year and a half of time on this failed venture. So I think the thing is to really just kind of start sooner rather than later, and realize that you're not going to know everything no matter how much research you do, and really just get out there and get started, especially if you're very young. Because if you're not married, you don't have kids, you don't have a mortgage, you don't have all these financial commitments, it's a lot easier to fail when you're 20 years old than it is to fail when you're 40 years old and have a family and kids that you have to support. So I think that's very important. Sooner rather than later, people need to get started.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to mention, especially because I think like nowadays, I don't have a family to support, but I have like other responsibilities than maybe when I was in my 20s, like getting out of college or something like that. And I'm kind of like, man, I kind of wish I started to do something else earlier. Maybe not instead. Like, I think, my experience has allowed me to learn a bunch of other things that, are helpful for me in general. But I'm kind of like, with what I want to do today, I'm kind of like, man, I kind of wish I started that earlier, because I would have had a lot more flexibility in that regard, to have that room to fail, right? And to just try things out. And it wouldn't have been like a big deal, then at the time, as it would be like 10 years later, like today. But yeah, so I think that's a good point that you make.
Yeah, I agree with that. So Jason, tell us a little bit about the journey to what you're doing now with multi-unit or multifamily properties.
Sure. So basically, it's like, as I said earlier, I started kind of flipping single family houses, and then got caught up in a couple rentals, which basically tied up all my money, and I couldn't really do anything else. So I just kind of held on to what I had. I continued working my regular job, in the nightlife industry. And then in 2016, at that point, I think I only had 3 rentals, and I kind of I had saved up some money, and I thought, okay, let's get going on this. And that's when I bought my first fourplex, March of 2016. Once I started doing that, I kind of realized, like, why didn't I start this sooner? This is way better than single family. And then I don't even really know what happens. I don't even know if I could replicate it, but it just kind of exploded. And I had gotten a lot of equity in the properties that I had held over the years, so I was able to refinance those and free up a lot more money. And once again, it takes money to make money. And then I also partnered with another investor who infused some money in. So then I started another LLC, and we started buying properties ourselves. And it just, the market appreciated, and all of a sudden we were buying 4-unit, then I'm buying an 8-unit, then I'm buying a 20-unit, then I'm buying a 28-unit, then I'm buying a 36-unit. And it really just kind of, snowball effect. It just kept getting bigger and bigger at such a rapid pace. And within probably about a 2 or 3 year period, I kind of accomplished things that I thought maybe in my lifetime I'll be able to make something like that happen. And it just happened. Like, it felt like overnight. And it was a lot of work, definitely a lot of work. But it allowed me to ultimately quit my regular job. And I could have quit it a long time ago, but I guess the way I saw that job was just a way to inject more money into my business. The longer I could keep working that job, I could funnel all that money directly into the investments. And with those investments, they generate that much more money. And that's kind of how I held on for so long.
That's really smart. And I think a lot of people have challenges in deciding, when am I going to quit my day job? I have this business where I've built it to a point where it's making me a good amount of money, but when do I pull the trigger? And it's interesting, like for you to actually pull the trigger, because I've known you for a long time. You've been in the industry for a long time. So how did you finally make that decision?
I feel I made that decision because I was working about 80 hours a week and I was only sleeping for about 4 hours a night. I basically wouldn't go to bed till about 6 in the morning because I worked in the nightclub. I'd sleep till 10. By the time you wake up at 10, that's a good ways into the regular business day. And I would just wake up, and the second I would grab my phone, my eyes are burning from lack of sleep, and I'd look at it and I'd have 17 text messages, 5 missed calls, 3 voicemails, 20 emails, and literally just starting my day off, I hated life, essentially. I woke up to problems, nothing but problems, and a lot of them. And I would do that all day. I'd maybe nap for an hour, and then I'd go work all night and then repeat. And I just felt really just kind of miserable and just kind of hating life. And I just got to that breaking point where I was just like, I don't need this anymore. Like, I've built up a very successful business. There's no point in killing myself to work this nightclub job, And if I stop doing that nightclub job and I actually get a full night's sleep and able to have my mind working at 100%, how much more can I grow this business if I'm 100% focused? But I do think I drug it on maybe a little longer than I should, but there's just something comforting about that routine paycheck. And, there's no responsibility generally for your regular job in terms of you do your job and you don't have to worry about all the company expenses or the business model changing. There's nothing like that. Whereas all that falls on your shoulders when you have your own company.
Right.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so, what I'm hearing you say is that basically it was like you thought about sort of like the cost benefit analysis to like what you're doing and how you're living your everyday life. Like, this is getting too tiring. It's like, why am I doing both when you can just do one? And so, like, if you can remember, how long were you doing that for, like both things, where then you decided like, enough is enough. I really don't need to be doing two things. And I can definitely understand what you're saying about the kind of like comfort, like fallback plan of like a regular paycheck too, right? So how long were you doing both?
As I said, I kind of started the real estate in 2010, and I was doing both until really the end of, I guess, 2020. But it really, my business in the very beginning didn't really affect my normal life. It was just a little bit of work here, a little bit there. So I'd say maybe for about 2 to 3 years, I was pretty busy juggling both, and definitely the last 6 months to a year. I think that was kind of like the misery period, I guess I'll call it, where I was working that 80 hours a week and I was just so unhappy, just so burnt out.
Yeah, for sure. No, I would be too. I was like listening to you say how that was like, and I was like, man, I feel like I would just be tired all the time and like trying to just drag myself to do everything right all day long. So
Yeah, a
I
lot
hear
of
you.
alcohol really kind of helped get me through that period. Just end of the day, you're just like, you just want to cry, you're just like overwhelmed. You're like, I'll just drink a little bit and go to sleep and wake up tomorrow and try and start this again.
So it's funny because at some point, and I know we're kind of going off into a tangent a little bit here, but at some point during this like lead up to the burnout period, you decided to hire employees, right?
Yeah, and I feel the burnout period was definitely already going, and it's really hard to relinquish control, not because I feel the need to control everything, but when you first start with employees, it takes longer for you to train them to do the task than it does for you to just do it yourself. And that's really hard because when you're so overwhelmed, you think like, I'll just handle it myself. And I'm like, well, if I keep handling it myself, I can't keep growing. I already have more work than I can handle. So you kind of got to take that extra time to train somebody. And thankfully, the first person, both people I hired, I've actually known for quite a long time. And I think that really helped because I knew them well. I knew what they were capable of. I knew their strengths, their weaknesses, and I knew the best way to utilize them. So I feel it was only maybe 2 or 3 months before I really, well, no, actually, I take that back. It was probably about a year I had him working before I ended up quitting. And then I hired a second person, maybe 4 or so months after I hired him to help out. And they were huge helps. And I definitely couldn't be where I'm at without them. I don't know how I did it for so long, honestly, without them.
So I think one thing I heard on another podcast was hire before you need. Like, of course, you don't want to hire too far in advance where you're just starting your business, but it's better to hire before you actually need somebody. What are your thoughts on that?
I would agree. I mean, of course, yeah, you have to look at the, financial commitment of that and can you afford it? I do agree with that statement. And I think my problem was in my mindset, it's going to take me longer to teach this person to handle this task. I might as well just do it myself. I don't have much time. But if I would have done that, maybe 6 months sooner, I would have had the time then. So that's where I do think that saying is relevant. You're kind of digging yourself a hole that's going to get harder and harder to get out of by delaying hiring somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
So we want to kind of know, like in the now, what challenges are you facing in your business?
Well, one of the biggest challenges right now is, of course, COVID and these restrictions on evictions, which I could talk about for hours. But to try and sum it up, the thing that upsets me the most is in the media, all you hear about are these poor tenants, we can't evict them, we can't make them homeless, which I understand. I'm not a heartless person. But what they're not looking at is the owners. I mean, we don't have endless pockets. And essentially, the government has turned us into a charity housing these people for free. And I'm all for if the government doesn't want these people to end up on the streets and be homeless, but we need to get paid because I have people that I have on the payroll. I still have to pay property tax, insurance, the utilities, the repair and maintenance for these units. I have to pay all the workers that do the repair and maintenance. I have to pay for my staff. So I have people counting on me. And if I'm not getting my money from the tenants, where's this money coming from? And the government will tell you that they have all these programs all day. Well, we just put $80 billion in this program, this and that. Well, unfortunately, it was on the tenants to get that money up until pretty recently. And a lot of my tenants, especially being low income, are very lazy people. That's why they're on government assistance, is because they're not motivated enough to go get a job, or they're not mentally capable to go get a job. So they couldn't really apply for these programs. And even when they do put it on us now, the landlords, we still do need the tenants to do some work. And then there's so much delay in these government programs. I actually haven't got a single dollar from the government programs. And I've had many tenants owe me, $7,000, $8,000. So that's my biggest concern right now, is essentially liquidity. How do you keep running a business in which you can't force your customers to pay you, and which you can't force the customers to leave if they decide to pay you? I think of it from a restaurant standpoint. If you had somebody that came in and ran up $100 bill and you went to run their credit card and it declines, you would generally say, okay, I'm sorry, we need to ask you to leave, and you just write that meal off as a loss. But the government's basically saying, I know they didn't pay for that meal, but they can stay there and they can keep ordering as much as they want, just put it on the tab, and there's no guarantee you're ever going to get paid. And that's where I'm at right now. That's extremely frustrating.
Right, definitely.
Yeah.
So what's going really well in your business right now?
Despite the big setbacks with the evictions, I say that we are scaling at a crazy rate. I mean, our growth is just astronomical. And just when I think, oh, well, there's no way we can beat last year, this year, somehow we do. So a big project that I have coming up right now is the purchase of a 111 unit building, which should hopefully end in a few weeks, the beginning of February. And once again, this goes back to, I would have never thought, 3 years ago, or probably even last year, that I would own a 111 unit apartment building. And then here I am, realizing that this is about to happen. So that's been incredible. And it's been a lot of work. We've had to sell a lot of our smaller properties to free up the money for this, but it's literally life-changing. I feel after I buy this property, I could probably have my staff just run the properties that we have, and I could go live on a beach somewhere and be set for the rest of my life. And I mean, that's an amazing feeling. Like I said, something that a couple of years ago, I would have thought maybe, when I'm 50 or 60, I could be at that point. And then it just kind of happened.
That's great. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's I don't even feel it's real yet. I think even when it happens, I won't feel it's real, because there's so much stress and so much leading up to it that it's like you can't even sit back and appreciate it. I feel it'll have to probably be a couple months after where I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened.
Yeah. So what would you say is something that keeps you motivated? Obviously, you have this upcoming big accomplishment, that you're waiting to be finished, right? To reach that point. Is there anything else aside from things like that or events like that?
I think a big motivator for me has always been, I want to be able to make money without working. They say make money while you sleep. And that kind of goes with what I just said. If I build up a business and then I can step away and have people run it without me, I can go anywhere in the world. I can go on vacation. I can go live here for a month, go there for a month, and still be making money. And I think that's the ultimate dream with owning your own business, is being able to one day step away from it and just have people run it and essentially send you money every month. and I mean, with money comes freedom. It allows you to do what you really want to do, which I love traveling, you know, so I want to travel. I want to see the world. That's what I'm looking for. I think that's what motivates me.
Cool. Yeah, for sure.
I think we all want that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about some business metrics that you track and maybe how those metrics impact your operations.
Well, on the purchase side, I'm really simple. A lot of people like analyze all the income and expenses and all this, which I don't care about at all. And the reason I say that is when you buy an apartment building, and this is with any business, you're essentially buying a business. But I don't care how someone else is running their business because I know how I'm going to run the business. So I can look at how much income they bring in and what their expenses are all day. I don't care because I know what income I'm going to bring in once I get rid of them. And I know how I'm going to cut my expenses. So all I look at when I purchase a property is the cost per door. In running the business, I look largely at expenses because I'm a big believer that the easiest way to make more money isn't to make more money, but it's to cut expenses. So I'm constantly looking for ways to lower expenses, and you can do that a number of different ways. You know, just weird things like shopping around your internet provider, you know, insurance, labor, materials. You know, these are all ways that you can get people essentially to bid or compete against each other for pricing and drastically lower expenses, especially as you scale. The larger you get, it's crazy how you can easily save thousands of dollars a day just by putting a little bit more legwork to shop around.
I agree. I mean, for all the savings though, you know, I think it's good for us to remember that there's a little bit of work involved, right? But at the end of the day, it's beneficial. So yeah, I think that's a good thing to mention.
Yeah, that's a good point, Shelley. Like, how much time and energy are you spending on cutting costs, like shopping around your cable provider or your internet provider? And do you ever think about like how that could be maybe utilizing more of your time and might not be worth it? Or do you feel like the things that you do decide to shop on are definitely worth it?
You know, sometimes you try and shop around and you come up that you already have the cheapest solution. But one way that I look at things is, let's just say like for internet or car insurance or, you know, business insurance, whatever you have, you know, let's just say you make $200 a day. It roughly is like what you make a day. If you can trim a bill down by $20 a month, that's $240 that you'll save in the year. So if it takes you a whole day to save $20 a month and you make about $200, you actually saved yourself $240. You made $240 that day essentially for the year. And that's the way I look at expenses is, you know, how much is your time worth? You know, if it takes me 8 hours to do something, but it saves me $1,000, that's great. You know, I made $1,000 today. Fantastic. If I can make $1,000 every day, you know, I'm going to be doing really well.
I knew you'd have a great answer for that.
But it's all comes with scale too. It's, you know, as I said, you know, in the beginning, it might not be worth it to try and save, you know, $1 here, $1 there. But when you're doing economies of scale, that's where, you know, just saving $1 on this one part, but you need 1,000 of those parts, you know, that's when you really can see significant savings. And that's one thing that I constantly look at and constantly get on my staff for is I'm just analyzing like, you know, how could we save? I always tell them you can easily make or cost me $500 within a few minutes by decisions that you make. And those are the things that I get upset about is when I do see you could have done this differently and instead that cost me $500, you know, that's upsetting.
Oh, no pressure. Well, is there anything else that you might want to add? Any tips or tricks or advice that you wanted to put out there for our audience?
You know, I think I kind of went over some of it, but I just really do think that the biggest thing is to get started and stop thinking that you need to wait and stop thinking you need to research more. You really just need to go out there. You're going to learn far more out there in the field by your failures and your successes than you ever will by reading. And you're going to cost more time and possibly more money by just sitting on the sidelines waiting. You're never going to be ready. You're never going to 100% be ready to dive in. You're never going to have all the knowledge. Really just get started. I think that's the most important thing.
Well, I'm inspired. How about you, Shelley?
Yeah, I think it's good. Yeah, I agree. I think it is a matter of getting started. Mm-hmm.
Well, now we've come to the point in our interview episodes to go through the rapid fire questions, as I like to do every episode that we have a guest on. So we're just going to go through. I'm going to ask you, there's just 3 questions we ask all of our guests, and you just kind of shoot out the first answer that comes to your mind. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. What's one piece of advice you would give to someone who wants to start a business? I guess we kind of already covered that, but if you have anything else, I guess.
Yeah, that one piece of advice would be start the business.
There you go.
Even if you fail, sooner rather than later, you need to know if you can or can't do something. And if you can't, think of something else to do.
Love it. All right. Well, what's your creative outlet?
I think for me, my big passion, as I mentioned earlier, was travel. And it sounds weird, but if I'm going to go travel to a place, I literally will print out a map of that country. I will do a ton of research and find all these cool little, I like nature, so like nature places and kind of off the beaten path. And I'll put little pins in this map. And then from there, I'll kind of route what's the most efficient way to go see all this stuff. And within short periods of time, I'll see so much. And I'll even see locals that live there and say, I did this, that, and this. Half the stuff they never heard of. They're like, oh, how would that take you 2 or 3 weeks? I'm like, no, I did that all in a week.
What?
So for me, my big passion and kind of why I feel this is all worth it is travel, which unfortunately has been negatively affected by, of course, coronavirus. I haven't been doing a ton of exploring. However, I did go to Mexico 5 times last year, so I guess that was nice.
Nice. Well, is that your favorite place to travel? Or if not, where is your favorite place to travel? Or what does your dream vacation look like?
I wouldn't say it's my favorite place to travel. It's just with all the weird restrictions and every place has different rules and regulations. Since I've been there so much, I know what their rules are and I know I'm going to be able to have a good time. My favorite place I've ever been actually is New Zealand. I love outdoor adventure and that place is incredible. Let's see, I scaled glaciers where you kind of have like the pickaxes and you're literally going like up a sheer cliff. We helicoptered in to do all that stuff. They have the world's tallest waterfall that you can commercially whitewater raft. So I did that. That was pretty epic. They have a bunch of geothermal type stuff. We did naked zorbing, which you basically in this like huge see-through ball, they put a little water in and then you just go inside this big ball and they push you down the hill and you just roll all over the place. I did skydiving. They have this place called the Watomo glowworm caves, and it's these like little insects that in this cave illuminate these kind of greenish blue lights, and it just looks like you're in the most dark sky you've ever seen with the most beautiful stars in the sky. They have, I think it's called Hobbit Town, where they film, the Hobbit and all this stuff, but just a really, really cool place. That's my favorite so far, but I'm looking forward to once everything opens up to see some more stuff. And ultimately, I do love tropical beach locations. I mean, nothing's better than just sitting on the beach, relaxing, knowing that your staff is on the other side of the world, making money for you.
Nice. I have actually heard a lot of great things about New Zealand, so.
I feel like I've heard of that glowworm cave thingy that you were talking about, but it sounds like you like some very adventurous vacations.
Definitely. They also like, so New Zealand is actually the birthplace of bungee jumping. It's where it was created. So I bungee jumped off the bridge where they did the first bungee jump. They also have the world's tallest canyon swing. It's just crazy. Just every day was just epic. And at the end of the day, I was just like, I can't believe I did all that stuff today. It was insane.
That's so cool.
That's cool. Yeah. All right, Jason, if any of our listeners want to find you, what's the best place for them to do that? If you have any social media, email, or website, anything you want to mention?
Instagram's probably the best place to catch me. To find me, it's J as in Jason, and then the letters of the alphabet in the row, LMNOP, and then 10. So J LMNOP 10. Feel free to reach out to me. If you have any questions about business in general or investing, retirement accounts, stocks, I'm pretty knowledgeable and all that type of stuff. I'm very happy to share the information that it's taken me, well over a decade to learn with people and kind of shorten that learning curve. If you want to do real estate, of course, that's the stuff I know the most about. I'm happy to share, any knowledge. And I also do share a ton of what I'll say are kind of funny videos. As I said, we're in low income areas, so we have a lot of interesting crackheads doing crackhead things. It's pretty entertaining to watch, and I do try and mix it in with knowledge as well. So it's kind of like some entertainment and some like, oh wow, I can't believe I just saw that, as well as like, oh, that's really interesting information. Like I can use that.
And I can attest to that. I've definitely seen all of those things. There's really great information that he shares. So go check him out. Thanks, Jason. We really appreciate you coming on. We know you're a busy guy, and we can't tell you how much it means to us that you came on.
And I'm happy to help out and happy to share information with you guys and your listeners.
Thanks, Jason. And that's it for us.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Outright Effect. You can find us at theoutrighteffect.com. Follow us on our social media accounts on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, all at The Outright Effect. You can also reach out by emailing us at theoutrighteffect@gmail.com.